Chris, are you a mechanical engineer? I
No, I'm
never.
actually a civil engineer.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I graduated back in the 80s and I retired in 2018. So I've been a researcher since I retired. Went back into research and just studying. Got back into full time into health and longevity. And I have a couple companies. I have a supplement company for pets and a supplement company for humans. And the supplement company for pets was my main objective, but then didn't take very long where people started seeing results in their pets. And literally, it's mostly women in their 40s would say, you know, screw my cat. I want this for me. I have the same issues. I don't care about the cat anymore. I want to see results like this with me. Why can't I see these results? And so we told them, it was the supplements are human grade and they're actually were designed and tested on humans. But I went and did it on animals because it's just a smaller field. I didn't know anything about marketing. And I was mainly, doing it in my retirement. But but it was all tested on humans first. So everything was human grade supplements, and we just kind of, okay, let's just go with animals first because they're so much easier to work on. There's no risk factors, not as many. There's no stress, they don't drink, they don't cheat on their diet, you know exactly what they ate, you don't have to ask them. And so yeah, but just last year we started ahead of schedule, opening supplement option for humans.
Chris, what is your website?
It's so let's see if I can pull it up here. It's a zetaeffects.com. So we have the human tab and then the pets tab. But if you just go to zeta-effects.com, it'll take you right to our website.
That's both human and pets.
Yes. So there's a humans tab, which is Zeta Effects, and then Bloom Bioscience is the pets tab. And in there, we have a lot of research we've done, and it's all applicable. Whether it's with pets or humans, it goes back and forth. They have the exact same functions, pretty much the same diets. So kidney disease in a cat is the same as kidney disease in humans. And I've worked with nephrologists and veterinary nephrologists in humans, and it's interesting to get them in the same room. They thought there was like totally different, like you're talking about a car and a boat. They're not that different. They have a little more fur and a tail. Other than that, their physiology is identical.
Hey, Chris, when you
Yes,
talk
sir.
about kidney disease, don't we have to specify what type of disease it is? Are there more than one type of kidney disease?
Absolutely, absolutely. But in general, what we're talking about, well, so there's CKD, chronic kidney disease, and the different diseases typically, in my opinion, are just the different stages.
Uh-huh.
So, like minimal change disease, to me, it's not really even a disease. It's just acute kidney injury. And then when there's no damage, of course, when it happens acutely right away, there's no damage, so they call it minimal change disease. Originally, I think they defined it as saying that the the pores or the openings, the slits in the kidney capillaries where it goes through the glomeruli, that those were at a certain size. I believe it was nine micrometers, and that the albumin proteins were too big to go through, but with inflammation, they slightly enlarged, and then now the albumin protein started flowing through. So I said that's a minimal change. But that doesn't even make sense because when you get inflammation, it's going to make the whole opening smaller, not bigger. Okay, and that was one of the first issues we looked at, or I looked at when I got into this, was minimal change disease.
Hmm.
And and in doing research, it was interesting because I started in research at age 54 when I retired. That was 7 years ago. And I didn't know what a kidney was really, but it was just fascinating that every book I open, almost the opening statement is, we don't know what causes CKD. It's considered idiopathic or autoimmune, but we'll assume this and I go down the line. Or from an engineering standpoint, that just blows me away because, when we have a problem, we figure out how it works. So, for example, when a plane crashes, we'll go to the bottom of the ocean, middle of the ocean, bring it back on land, put it back together so it doesn't happen again. And that's why flying is so safe now because engineers have designed the planes so they don't crash. It's like if you got on a plane and the pilot said, "Hey, 1 out of 3 planes crash, so buckle up. You would never fly." But when I go to a doctor, they don't, I don't feel that confidence. Like I actually, when I was 51, I really went to doctor. My doctor, "Oh, your blood pressure's starting to get high. Well, next year we'll put you on a statin." Just flippantly, didn't ask anything about my diet, lifestyle, just said, we'll just put you on a statin next time you come in. And that was a wake-up call for me. I go, okay, that's not going to happen. And so that was part of the pathway of getting to where I'm at. But one of of all the thousands of research studies I've read, one really stood out. Well, several stood out, but one was called electrokinetic theory. And that explained how the kidneys really work. And once you understand how they really work, it was like dominoes falling down. It's like, oh boy, this answers everything. Okay, so I think I was telling you guys, my background is I'm an engineer by training. I've got a background in physics, fluid mechanics, but also nutrition, fitness, and health. The human body is the ultimate machine. And like any machine, engine, or pipeline, the longevity comes down to one thing, and that's minimizing friction. You want something to last long, you're going to minimize friction. Just like when your tires wear out, you got to replace them, and it's friction that's causing that. When pipelines wear out, you got to replace them. Average pipeline's got a 20-year lifespan. Your engine has got an average 200,000 mile lifespan, but what wipes those out is friction. And as I got older and watched, my family and friends start getting CKD and other chronic diseases, the simple question I had with kidneys, if the kidneys are a filter, why do we blame the filter when the fluid running through it gets sticky or dirty? Like say, so good car mechanics, and you go into them and they ask what's the problem with your car. They'll look at the filter. Oh, you're putting in cheap fuel. Chris, quit putting cheap fuel or cheap oil in your engine. It'll last a lot longer. So that's kind of so we talk to nephrologists. All they do is stare at the kidney. They start at the nephron, and they don't think anything upstream. They just let's look at the kidney and go from there. But what my research came out to find out it's upstream. So one of the good articles I came across was Melvin Knisley sludge blood. And I assumed it was Melvin Knisley. He had an article called Sludged Blood. It came out in 1947. And that was a 18-year study. It was up for 3 Nobel Prizes, or nominated 3 times for the Nobel Prize for I guess medicine or research. Didn't win, but it was a fascinating study. It was done over, like I say, 18 years, thousands of animals, humans, dogs, cats, every animal you could think of, to amphibians. And the whole premise was that it's called sludge blood. He coined that term, that the thicker the blood got correlated with the progression of disease. And at the end of his study, it didn't matter what disease it was, whether it was infectious or non-communicable disease, the sicker somebody was correlated with the thickness of the sludge blood. And so like a fast-acting disease, like say sepsis, he'd show, okay, here's a healthy amphibian, inject it with sepsis. And as it started getting sicker, by the end of the week, it was a gel and it died. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is they mentioned Alzheimer's disease, which goes 40, 50 years. but it can happen. So sepsis happens in a week. Alzheimer's can happen 40 to 50 years, but there's a thickness of the blood which correlates the progression of disease. And his whole, at the end of his study was he was imploring the government, NIH, and all researchers to throw all your money in, find out how to keep the blood from sludging. You'll have all the time in the world to work on disease because it's the sludge in the blood that's actually doing the damage, or the disease might be the catalyst.
May I interrupt with a question here? When you
Sure.
see the blood gets sludgy, does it mean it gets more viscous, or the higher number of red cells per cc, or what?
Yes, it's well the blood. Yeah, so blood when it's in its healthy form, it should be, you know, naturally nice and thin. The red blood cells repel each other, and it's frictionless, so less viscous, correct. But as it starts getting thicker, like say from oxidative stress, what happens is, and blood's a colloid, and that's something that a lot of researchers don't understand or even know the term. But when you uh, understand that blood's a colloid, you'll see the colloidal properties will start breaking down. So for example, on this slide, so here's a healthy colloid. So that's like say blood, milk's a colloid or wine's a colloid. So when those go bad, they coagulate and it separates, sinks to the bottom. Same thing when blood goes bad, it starts getting thicker, coagulates, clumps together, and it'll settle to the bottom, over time. But so for the example of sludge blood with Knisley, so let's say chronic kidney disease, this will happen over 20 years, right? But in sepsis, this will happen in a week. Boom, and you're gone. So once it turns into gel state, all the cells die of ischemia because they get clogged up. And he's the first one to point out too that your capillaries can only handle one red blood cell at a time. Any kind of clotting is going to clog those fine capillaries, and that's going to cause ischemia to your cells, to the organs. So, one of the other books that I got into is actually a book I had in my file was from Thomas Riddick. So in 1967, he wrote a book on zeta potential, and it's interesting that his chapter 22, which I never read as a student, what was titled, grab it real quick. It has a closing chapter on his relationship to cardiovascular disease, which at the time I was 18, I didn't care, but it's fascinating that a big part of the book talks about the colloidal properties of blood and how it relates to cardiovascular disease. Because at age 47, when he first started looking at it, he had a cardiovascular disease. He had constant arrhythmias, and his doctor said he could die within 3 months, maybe 3 years. They don't know when, they don't know why, they don't know how it's going to happen. Him being a colloidal chemist, and he figured, hey, if blood's a colloid, why don't I start doing my own thing? And he lived another 30 years because he treated himself like he did his chemicals with colloidal properties and with electrolytes. We could touch on that in a little bit here. But those are the two main books, are the Sludge Blood from Alvin Knisley and then Thomas Riddick's work, which helped me to successfully develop supplements where I can resolve acute kidney injuries and nephrotic syndrome and edema in pets. And we have a lot of case studies where we've done that on the website. And it's simply, all we did was you fix the blood naturally and did nothing with the kidneys, and their kidney problems went away. But this is if they was acute kidney injuries. Now, if they're at like stage 4, past stage 3, stage 4, so there's a lot of damage done, it's not a quick fix. But if they have a healthy kidneys, meaning they're non-azotemic, and it's acute kidney injury, we can typically flip it around pretty quick. And then that's what.
Christopher, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Is this low zeta potential the same thing as erythrocyte sedimentation rate?
Well, that's what's happening. The sedimentation rate just shows a healthier blood because it measures, I think, within 1 minute, on how far the blood moves in that little capillary. So the slower it moves down, the unhealthier it is.
Alexander, this is Pam. One of the ways to think about this is the terminology you are using is the chemistry terminology, whereas the terminology that Christopher is using is more of the electrical engineering perspective on what is happening.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So I'm talking in colloidal properties and colloidal chemistry. But again, blood is a colloid, so it's applicable. It's the same uh, the same language. The only difference is nobody talks about it in the medical field. It's a property they're not looking at. And in my opinion, it's a major property that they're ignoring. Uh, and if you really want to understand health, you need to understand colloidal chemistry in, in blood and how it works and how it affects the body.
Chris, if I can help you out for just a second on this perspective, coming from the medical field perspective, what is the definition of whether or not something is alive or dead? The chemistry for a period of time after something is dead, it actually still looks the same. Whereas the physics, the electrical energy dissipates extremely rapidly. So it's really that physics perspective that is not well taught in the medical industry that engineers live their whole lives in.
True. True. Yes. Yeah, but there's a lot of differences. Like I said earlier, it's like in our field, we understand how something works before we even work on it. And so it didn't seem like until 2015 they actually had a paper that's not even well known that explains how the kidneys actually work. And it was a tough paper to find because it's called the electrokinetic theory. It doesn't even mention the kidneys. So trying to find that when you're doing a Google search was tough. When you're doing kidney research, stumbled upon it because I was typing in colloidal properties and it mentions how it works. And I'll have a slide coming up that'll show how it works and how it's thought to work. So right now, the way it's taught is the kidneys work as a size select filter. Okay. And when Moeller and Cup, who published the study, the electrokinetic theory, they explain it's size select and electrokinetic. So you have your negative charges, like your red blood cells. Each red blood cell has 20 million plus negative charges called electrons. And the lining of all your blood vessels is lined with glycocalyx, which has a negative charge. And so those repel each other, which keeps it pretty much frictionless, kind of like a maglev train. And you have two negatives that repel each other. And so when it moves, there's zero friction. And that's why, we can live to be, past 80 years old when even these, in engineering, these thick pipes only have a 20-year lifespan because there's friction. Even though it's minimal, friction will still eventually wear it out. But as the blood thickens, that friction starts wearing out the glycocalyx. You start getting endothelial erosion, and that's when health starts going down. And that's what aging is blood vessels wearing down, endothelial erosion. Let's go next slide. So this is from Malvin Knisley. He was the first one to show under a dark microscope healthy red blood cells. They repel each other because up until this point, everyone thought red blood cells were sticky because when they pull it out, quickly get oxidized, they'd stick together. But he's the first one to show no, they actually repel each other. So there must be a negative charge in there on why they don't touch. They always stay separated. When they started the first thing they did when they inject an animal with the disease, they started clumping. And that was to prove his theory, this 18-year study that, hey, sludge blood is the first effect of disease, whether it's, again, an NCD, non-communicable disease, or an infectious disease.
I found that slide very interesting because we see that when we talk about uses of systemic ozone, you see those palisaded red cells, and you put some ozone in the blood, and then you see what you saw on your left.
You do? Okay. Oh, great. Yeah, so it's somehow raising zeta potential.
Yeah.
You're raising the electrokinetic properties of the fluid itself. So this next slide, I'm going to show. So here's a simple tool which I think was the whole point of this conversation we're having. So Terry and Rick were talking about I get the glycocheck tool, which is a brilliant tool. It's a great tool. It's quite expensive. I didn't know how expensive it was. They told me the price. So it was just a conversation amongst friends. I said, basically, well, this is what I use instead, because this you can measure. So every time you eat or drink, you're changing the chemistry of your blood. Okay. And so as a real-time check, the glyco check, you go, I don't know how often you check that. I'm assuming on your checkups, but once a year. That's just a snapshot of that exact moment, what's going on through glycocalyx. Because that glycocalyx it comes and goes. If you read about it, it can be wiped out in 45 minutes and it can grow back within, I want to say within a week. And that's, you're constantly going to be, it's like a tide, in and out, wears out, comes back, wears out. Basically, because what you're eating and drinking. Again, you change the chemistry every time you eat or drink of your body. What I like about this tool, what I was talking to Terry about, was every time, like if you measured your urine, you're going to know, you're going to pull your head out of the sand. When people always drink these energy drinks or they want to drink a cola, even the diet soda, um, coffee, beer, whatever you drink, essentially we just drank water. And in my opinion, that's all you should be drinking again. Just like your cat or dog, all you need is water. And it should be the right water, a good spring water with the, minerals and electrolytes in it. But what this tool does, so every time you pee, you're going to notice a difference in your electroconductivity. So if you measure it between 12,000 and 15,000, which is 12 to 15 milliseconds per centimeter is how it measures, then you're right in the zone. But for example, if I drank like an orange juice, which has a lot of sugar in it, and next time I went pee, I'd probably measure around 8,000, really low, which means my blood is sludging. So what I like about this tool, well, besides it being inexpensive, I can measure real time. So I can measure 5 or 6 times a day. And I always tell my friends and family, when they're drinking these sugar drinks, they don't think there's any repercussion to them. I go, well, within 3 minutes, it's in your bloodstream.
So Chris,
Yes, sir.
that unit of measurement that you're referring to, milliseconds per centimeter, is a very strange sounding unit. How does that correlate with the pH?
Well, the pH, they're both temperature related. So they don't correlate with the pH itself. But the pH and the EC and temperature correlate with zeta potential. And so in the kidneys, if you're above this number, you're stressing them out, meaning you have too much salt in your system called salting out, whether it's any kind of salt, any kind of electrolyte. So if you have like a big salty steak meal and the next time you go to the restroom, next time you go pee, it'll measure probably about like 25,000, 28,000. And that's why, they always they correlate.
What is measuring 28,000? You don't see that on a pH meter. Where
No,
are
no,
you seeing that?
no, the EC, the electroconductivity. So I'm sorry. So I switch back and forth. So the meter measures in microseconds until it gets to 10,000. So it'll say, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, all of a sudden it goes 10,000, 11. So it changes the milli. So this is 15 is 15,000 milliseconds per centimeter. So you'll see that the meter actually changes it automatically once it goes over 10,000. So if you're measuring, I'll switch to the same nomenclature here. If you measure a 29 after salty meter, a salty meal, you have way too much salt in your system. That's putting stress on your kidney. And over time, that's what wears down the kidney also. But so that's a good real check. Again, if you're when you're eating and drinking throughout the day, you'll know what absolutely is moving the needle per se. Instead of like once a year with the glyco check, okay, how did I get here? I ate 10,000 meals last year, had 50,000 drinks of everything you can think of. How does that correlate to at this second in time, what my glycocalyx is? And to me, it doesn't. It's a cool tool and a cool check, don't get me wrong, but I like this one because it tells me real time, okay, what am I doing on a daily basis that's affecting me? And so this is how I get friends off these energy drinks. I go drink an energy drink. This 12 to 15 premium will go down to like 2 to 5, between 2 and 5. Okay. And I encourage all of you to try it too. Just whatever you're drinking, do your normal diet and get one of these and measure it. And you're gonna see how
You're talking about electrical conductivity. You have a separate meter for that?
a separate meter for what?
For electrical conductivity, EC.
This measures electroconductivity. So the EC, this is the units. It measures right here.
Okay, so you're getting a EC unit that correlates with the effects on the blood cells. It secondarily measures pH.
Correct, correct. So if you're at the optimum, so just like the pH in your blood, the EC of your blood is going to stay constant. It has to. So the pH of your blood is going to be just below 7.4. You go above it, you're dead. You go below it, you're dead, right? Same thing with the EC electroconductivity of your blood. It's at 12,500. And so your body's going to do everything it can to keep it that way. So that's why when you measure this, you'll know you're in the zone when you match the EC. But if you go below it, it means you don't have enough, your zeta potential is weak and your blood's starting to thicken. If you go above it, your zeta potential is weak, your blood's starting to thicken, and your kidneys are being stressed because they're trying to get rid of the excess uh, electrolytes, which is typically, in most cases, sodium.
May I interrupt again and ask you, have you ever tried the EC meter on saliva?
No, I haven't. I know I've done the pH on saliva. It's roughly about 6.7, 6.8, but I haven't done it on saliva. No.
That's interesting because theoretically that represents the intracellular environment for the body, not what's inside the cell, but between the cells.
Yeah, I would have to probably get a really fine meter to do that because this takes about like about 2 ounces.
Yeah, well, you can do it.
But it would be interesting. It would be interesting to measure it and see how that correlates.
Well, you know I'm going to do it.
Christopher, in terms of a physician trying to understand where a person is as far as a glycocalyx, when's the best time to collect the urine?
Well, that's what I said. This meter, the beauty of it is you can do it all day long. But if because again, it changes your chemistry changes every time you eat or drink. And so if you measure it like for one day, or ideally measure for a week, or have the patient measure it, or you yourself measure your own, and take and do a log of what you're eating and drinking, you're going to understand exactly what's affecting your system, affecting your health for better or for worse.
To make this really easy for you, think of the glycocalyx like a blood pressure. The variability will be that dramatic based upon the time of day, the activity, the consumption of food, drink, all of those things. The glycocalyx will ebb and flow. So if you are looking at measuring a patient, the key is the consistency of the measurement. So like first thing in the morning, right before they go to bed at night, things like that. Same as what you would advise a patient with their blood pressure.
Well,
Right, right.
if you look at the glycocheck, it's measuring the thickness, ostensibly, of the glycocalyx. It has maybe nothing to do with the electrical conductivity.
The glycocheck, to be specific, is looking at the perfused boundary region. And by measuring the thickness of the perfused boundary region is able to determine the health of the glycocalyx. Furthermore, it is doing it with imagery. And the interesting thing about the imagery component is we can discern what the 4 micron, 5 micron, and 6 micron capillaries are doing. What Christopher's doing is an excellent, proposition. The difference is what he is measuring is zeta potential. He's measuring something that's very much related to what we find out with the glycocheck and with the health of the glycocalyx. He's absolutely right. Zeta potential is absolutely critical, but it's a different way of looking at it.
I think this is very interesting, but there must be charts showing this is the glycocalyx measurement, and this is the parallel EC measurement, and let's see how they behave one versus the other.
Bill, now you know exactly what I'm looking at doing because I do have a glyco check here. So I would love to come alongside and do exactly that so that we can see how these two correlate.
Right.
Oh, that'd be really cool. And how often do they recommend a glycocheck analysis?
The determination of how long, how often they do a glycocheck analysis, Chris, I'm right there with you about the cost of the tool. It's outrageous. I am a practitioner. I am not I'm not an employee of Glycocalyx Research Institute or anything like that. They built that tool to be used in research hospitals and things like that. If you go and you look at their website, they've done a beautiful job of collecting the research, proving the research. It has been a huge contribution, which I deeply appreciate as a practitioner. However, for practical use in a home environment, no, that's not going to happen. What they'll recommend is when the patients come in for, like, let's say for the dentist, all right, every time a patient comes in for a cleaning, that's when you would check their glycocalyx. If you have a patient who has got periodontal disease and you're seeing them much more often, like once every 12 weeks, then you would go ahead and do it as an assessment when they're coming in to get those periodontal treatments. With physicians tend to be doing it with the physical, or if they have a patient who's coming in more often because of something like, CKD or something like that, they will go ahead and do it each time they're coming in to get those assessments done.
Okay, but I think you explained it. It also ebbs and flows. So I guess I've always wondering, like for me personally, like, okay, did I ebb or flow during this time? Was it robust or was it because, something I just drank?
No,
Well,
I
this is
completely
very interesting because
concur with you. And here's how they adjust for that. They actually work with the patients to create more of a baseline type of situation. So what they'll do is they'll try to get those patients to fast and to have not had food within a certain period of time before actually getting their glycocheck done. The other thing they'll do is they'll encourage them to not drink coffee because you and I both know the impacts of the glycocalyx with caffeine or any other caffeinated products. The other thing that they'll do is they will also do we keep a journal, at least I do. I keep a journal on my patients to where we're tracking their, all of the things that affect that ebb and flow. The other reality of this, and Chris, you know this because of the fact that you own a supplement company, it is very easy to keep those glycocalyx looking quite healthy depending upon what you have them on for a supplement regimen. So even if you're ebbing and flowing, if you are, if you have the fucoidins on board and stuff like that, that ebb and flow is pretty minor compared to when you don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely
well,
right.
here's the question. I see a glycocalyx as a bazillion little strands of proteins lining the endothelium. But what I'm hearing here is that maybe the electrical charge makes those proteins stand up and makes the glycocalyx look thicker. It's not that the proteins come and go, but they may be inflated in a sense by virtue of the charges and absence of charges.
I, yeah, I mean they go hand in hand because the healthy glycocalyx has hyaluronic acid and other proteins in there that are giving it the electrical charge.
Uh-huh.
But I think with that glycocheck, that's why I like it. It's a cool tool. You can show the thickness of it though, because when you get the electrical charge in correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like a little algae type seaweed that kind of grows.
It really, to be quite honest, when you look at the actual images, and we do have actual images, and on top of my medical background, I also happen to be a regenerative agrarian certified in holistic management, and I just keep laughing at how much what's inside the body mimics what we see in nature. The glycocalyx looks like, you know, either like long seaweed on
Yes.
the bed of the ocean that is, you know, flowing back and forth when it's healthy versus, let's say there's been you know, a toxic oil spill or something else that just totally knocks out all that seaweed. At which point, you know, the other example from the grassland perspective would be
Yeah, but
grassland
here's the question. Here's
short.
the question. Imagine somebody who has normal hair and they get into an electrical environment like a lightning storm and their hair stands on end. That to me is like a thick glycocalyx. And when the charges change, then they all collapse down.
That's an interesting theory. What I've actually seen is that calcification occurs, and what we have from the research is we actually see the calcification of the lining occurring when there is no glycocalyx present. So what you end up seeing is you end up seeing something that's more like long and flowing versus shorn short, like sheep have gone through and ate the grass all down to nothing. And that's then where we see those calcifications. So I don't know quite how that correlates with how you're looking at this point in time, Bill, but I do know that we see calcification deposits trying to plug the holes to prevent the leaky capillaries when the glycocalyx is actually missing.
Well, this is
Yeah.
all interesting theoretical material. The critical thing is how does it correlate with health? How does it correlate with making our patients healthier? And I think that's much easier to demonstrate than some of the uh, uh, tiny electron microscope kinds of issues.
I think it totally correlates. I mean, if you got a healthy glycocalyx, then you know, obviously you're healthy. But if you know,
I
the
can help you
glycocheck
out.
also, go ahead.
Christopher, I can help you out on this one. Bill, go to Glycocalyx Research Institute, go to the Glycocalyx website, go underneath research, and then there are boatloads of articles there in the PubMed. That is the one thing that I will give strong credit to Glycocalyx Research Institute for doing, and particularly Dr. Hans Finks, PhD. He's done a phenomenal job of doing that research. So that correlation between health and glycocalyx is pretty clearly established
I'm
at this
not
point.
disputing that at all. And I would like to see something similar with the issue numbers just as well.
I would agree with you. I think, you know, Chris, that really is the way ahead. And that's what I put in the question to you, is it would be awesome to see some of the actual, you know, to take all this phenomenal hard work you're doing and let's put it into some research, you know, and documenting and looking at it. Because I, with you, love the idea of a patient having a tool in their hand that I can measure real time, often like we do with a blood pressure.
Yeah, and you know, the main people I talk about doing this with is when I'm trying to change someone's diet. You know, everyone thinks, ah, what's one Coke? What's one Monster energy drink? But over time, like anything, it's just repetitiveness. It takes its toll. You know, the constant friction from the low zeta potential. And that's kind of my point here. The zeta potential isn't even discussed anywhere in medicine. The health of the blood being the key factor, which is driven by zeta potential and the colloidal properties, it isn't, you know, isn't even on the radar. And that's my whole point with anything we talk about in our supplements is to bridge that gap, understand blood's a colloid, and just we treat one thing, the vascular system. You know, some people accuse me of having a snake oil because it does so many things. Well, the vascular system does a lot of things. You know, it does millions of things, by the way. So someone takes some of our case studies when somebody helps with heart disease and takes it for you know, arrhythmias, or if they have irregular heartbeats and they start getting better, or they're getting kidney disease, and it helps them repeat like, oh, it does too many things. It sounds like snake oil. Like, you know, we're doing one thing, we're repairing the vascular system. And once you get the vascular system in, you know, downstream of that, the organs go bad. And so that's the kind of what we're looking at as the colloidal properties.
That's what would happen if you took that same meter and stuck it into a little pool of blood instead of urine.
Well, you couldn't measure because instantly when blood hits oxygen, it's going to coagulate. So you have to do it in situ. You have to get a tiny one and slip it inside the vein. You couldn't really measure it. So we do have you can measure zeta potential blood, and we've done it. It's just tough. It's tough to do. It's expensive.
Oh boy,
Um,
I bet it'd be pretty easy. You just take something like nitrogen and put it into a cup, then take a syringe of blood and put an ounce of blood into that cup while preserving the nitrogen environment, and then do your measurement.
yeah, well, yeah. When we draw it out, we have a similar way we do it. We draw it out without getting outside air, and we have a zeta meter, which
Yeah,
is it's a $90,000 tool where we can measure zeta potential. We don't use it for blood because every time you do it with blood, it just wipes out the plates, and
yeah,
those are expensive plates.
yeah.
So every measurement, costs us like about $150 just on parts. We got to replace every time.
Yeah.
But so that's why the EC meter is kind of a proxy for it. If your electroconductivity, again, your urine mirrors your blood. So to me, it's a simple tool. If we can measure the electroconductivity, knowing blood is optimally is about 12,500, the closer your urine is to that number, the closer, by proxy, I know my zeta potential is good. And again, the whole point of this was something you could do constantly, real simple and cost effectively. But yes, we can measure zeta potential blood. It's time consuming and expensive right now, in our lab. I'm sure eventually, if they start looking at it, there's a quicker, easy way to do it, or a more economic way to do it. But right now, we don't have that capability. Again, that's the whole point of using this EC meter is to kind of, let's do a little shortcut here.
Sounds like a great idea.
Pardon?
It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm gonna go on a little bit more about the science here. So, along with the colloidal properties, proteinuria and hypercoagulation are kind of overlooked, especially proteinuria. So in the study I'm talking about, the electrokinetic theory, Marcus Muller and Christopher Cupp did this great study on how the kidneys really work. And almost every nephrologist I sent this to, they just kind of shrugged their shoulders. I guess they didn't understand the colloidal properties or the colloidal implications of blood. So to them, this study meant nothing. But to an engineer who understood the colloidal properties of blood, this meant a lot. It's like, okay, this explained like a billion questions I had, and it pointed me all to the direction, okay, that kidney disease is an upstream issue. It's actually a vascular disease. Just like, Alzheimer's. Alzheimer himself said back, 100 plus years ago, was Alzheimer's is a vascular disease. It's nothing to do with the brain. It's a vascular disease. And we kind of ignore that. But understanding zeta potential and how the blood works, and with Knisley's sludge blood, it reinforces the fact that, hey, we got to look upstream and quit looking at the downstream organs, the damage that's happening afterwards. Let's look upstream. And so here's this kind of a summary of electrokinetic theory. So right now, healthy kidneys, have a glomerular capillary coming through. You have your red blood cells, negative charge. The glycocalyx, shown as a little fuzz here, has a negative charge. So the negative charge items in the blood are going to pass through the filters, are going to go, are going to skip the filters because they're repelled electrokinetically. And so what's going to come through is all the waste products. The waste products are neutral, and so they're going to come through the urine and get peed out normally. But once the zeta potential breaks down, you start getting hypercoagulation, proteinuria. You're getting albumin starts coming through the glomerulus, the glomerular barrier, and it breaks through because it loses the negative charge and the colloidal properties itself. And that's what Cupp and Muller pointed out was, so originally they say, and they still say it, that these openings are too small for albumin to fit through, which is not the case. Albumin can fit through in a healthy kidney, but it's that negative repulsion that keeps them out. But once that dies down, like say the force field dies down, like in Star Trek Enterprise, our force field is down. Boom! Now this starts coming through. It starts breaking through, and as it gets worse. But what happens is that creates a lot more friction. You're getting friction from the blood flow coagulation, which wipes out the glycocalyx, and that's what's creating the calcification. As your body's trying to heal it, but at the same time you keep wiping it out faster and faster with as this positive feedback loop happens. You know, as coagulation builds up, you get higher blood pressure or higher pressure, higher friction, wears it down faster. Body keeps throwing more plaque at it to try and heal it, and it becomes a positive feedback loop, which eventually scars over the nephrons in the kidney, and that's when it just loses its ability to filter. So that was a to me that study on the electrokinetic theory really explained a lot to me because I couldn't figure out why these didn't go through, albumin didn't go through all the time when the slit openings were big enough.
And that fibrosis, that scarring, is permanent, unreversible, right?
In my opinion, yes. Yes. Once it's scarred over, it's scarred over. You know, you're not going to, you know, the nephrons, they don't rebuild back. You have 1 million plus per kidney, and that's it. You lose them, they're out.
I'm not going to push back on that one way or the other. I would say that it would be good to have a conversation with Dr. Jerry Tennant about that, who does a lot about work on zeta potential and everything else. He has had some remarkable successes in his clinic.
I would also talk to Tim Rainey because his work has been with ozone and hyperbaric oxygen, and he has seen some tremendous reversals.
Yeah, well, I'll show you a quick case study that we do all the time. So here's a cat. His name's Slim Shady. He's got a lot of, he came to us, he's pretty sick. He had FIP, we thought he had FIP, but he had FIV, chronic URI, and a bunch of other little diseases. But he had, the vet came and said, hey, he's peeing blood. So day one, he's got hematuria and proteinuria in his blood. And they wanted to try our water. So the hydration product we make, we feel has the optimum amount of, will optimize your zeta potential in your blood. So you have the right amount of minerals and electrolytes and the proper ones. That's going to give us what we think is the maximum zeta potential we can put in your body naturally without a blood transfusion. So on day one, he had the blood. Started drinking the water. Day two, no blood. Day three, no blood. Day four, no blood. A different vet came in on the 5th day, gave him regular tap water. He started getting hematuria again in his blood, in his urine. And so they called me, hey, what's going on here? I go, did you change the water out? He didn't know what I was talking about. Gave him the right water. Day 6, he stopped peeing again. So it happened that fast. So basically what was happening here, the albumin in the blood were coming through the slits. But once we raise the zeta potential by raising the electrokinetic properties of the fluid, it bounced right back and was able to keep it out. And so our other goal is, okay, now once we raise it up with the water, now we have our pill, what we consider to be what rebuilds the vascular lining of glycocalyx. It's like it's fertilizer for your vascular system. It rebuilds the walls. It has a sulfur component, which, you know, since 1932, we don't get sulfur in our foods anymore. It's all been farmed out, long gone. And so we have sulfur components, hyaluronic acid, and 14 other different minerals to rebuild the glycocalyx. And so but this we can do all day long. We do case studies like this, and it's really quick when they have an acute kidney injury to bounce it back within 24 hours to 48 hours. And the sad part about this is currently 50 to 60% of cats and dogs with acute kidney injury are put down. They don't live within the month because the first thing they do is give them an antibiotic thinking it's some kind of bacteria, even though they don't have any red white blood cells elevated, or they start giving other medications that crash the zeta potential more, and so it makes the problem worse. And so but every vet involved, they kind of shrug their shoulders, and it doesn't click with them, no matter how I explain it to them, that they just There's a few holistic vets will bite off on it and say, okay, this does work. We don't understand why. We'll just give it the water. But other vets, it's just a tough battle because from day one, they're just told since their first day in vet school, supplements don't work. So it's really hard to break their habit and change their way of thinking. But but yeah, so basically that's kind of all my whole thing I wanted to talk about was just the EC meter. And here's our two products. I'll just not really going to pitch, just explain what they do. So here's the hydration, which to us, if you mix in 1 packet per liter, this should be the only water that we use deionized water, by the way, or distilled water. This should be the only water every mammal should be drinking. To us, if you went to the Garden of Eden and found that fountain, this is what it would have in it. And so this is your prime water you want to drink, and that's going to stabilize your zeta potential. And if you have any kind of damage going on, which we all do, this is fertilizer for your vascular system. And that's our whole science,
Can
really.
you mention where you get the EC meter?
I mentioned what?
Where do you get the EC meter?
By that last word, I can't hear you.
The meter, METER, where do you get it?
From Amazon.
Oh, Amazon. Yeah, you can get them anywhere. Amazon, any pool store will sell them. But if you buy on Amazon, they're much cheaper. You go to a pool store, they'll sell them for like $100. But if you go to Amazon, but you want to make sure it measures the EC, electroconductivity. A lot of them just measure the pH, or they'll measure that, and they'll have like multiple settings on there. So you can measure the pH, you can measure the total dissolved solids, you can measure the amount of salt. Yeah, it depends on which meter you get. Most have 4 to 5 different functions, and the temperature is always shown on there.
Well, Chris,
Christopher?
this has been extremely interesting. I think there's a tremendous amount of potential here.
Christopher?
Yes, sir.
When I first heard about this, I thought this might be a really useful tool for inpatient to check their urine when they came to the clinic. But I realize now this is really more like almost like a continuous glucose meter, where you're measuring the zeta potential after certain foods, and people can try to find out what foods or drinks are really causing them to go out of balance, and try to then kind of know what foods to avoid and what drinks to avoid, etc., to keep their zeta potential more optimal.
Yes, yes, sir, exactly. So this basically stemmed from a conversation. I don't really tell people to use this. As Tara and I are having a conversation, I just kind of off the cuff, this is what I use to open up people's eyes, because most people you talk to, I'm sure you guys have, I don't know how you do it. You have people, you'll tell them, don't drink this, don't drink that. It's so bad for you. I'm like, I'm doing fine. But once they see it and you can measure it, I think they'll change their tune. And that's all it is hopefully as a tool to say, okay, it is true that everything I eat or drink changes the chemistry of my body almost instantly. And so it's mainly for that. It's I don't use it for any other thing. We don't sell it. We don't use it much in our products. We just it was just the conversation Tara and I are having, and it morphed into this conversation here.
Look behind you.
Here's what I would encourage that we could take a look at doing, and we've got the ability, this is the whole reason why we've set up ogpro.org, is we're starting to set up case studies. We actually even can do the whole IRB and everything else there. What I would love to do, and I've got the ability to do it here, and if there's anyone else who's got a glycocheck, we can certainly do it, with their clinic patients as well. I would love to see us just put together something small and get started on measuring the zeta potential, measuring with the glycocheck, and just start validating some of what you've been doing, Chris, and that you've been really working so hard on. And so that we can actually bring this more into being an actual tool. And of course, as well as I do, with you having your own supplement company there, the real benefit is twofold. One, in the education, getting people to change their behaviors. And this is a way that you could do that real time. The second real benefit is There are things out there that do rapidly reverse this, just as you've shown with your cat situation right there. And I have watched it happen. I mean, in fact, Minkoff's not on the call right now. We measured Minkoff's glycocalyx at the Frontiers and Ozone Conference, and his score was not where he wanted to see it. And so he immediately started taking the supplement, and it's the fucoidins. You and I both know that the fucoidins are like a major game changer.
Yep.
And in 4 days, it was much higher. And he actually was feeling the difference.
Excellent.
So I'm going to go ahead and put the OG Pro website link in there for anyone who wants to come on board. We do have a private membership. Yes, there's a cost to it. The reason is I need to build the databases that are going to hold all this. And that takes a little bit of finances to be able to pull that all off. And so we're trying to pull that together, put that together so that we can start getting good standard operating procedures. And Chris, I'd love to connect with you after this so that we can look at how we can get a win-win with the work you're doing and what we're trying to pull together from the research side so that we can give practitioners the, the information that they need.
Okay, great. Great. And if anybody here on this call wants the two products I have, I'll gladly send to you for no cost. You can try them out.
I'm on them every day. I'm no longer on blood pressure pills, and with my vision, readers 1.0, and I started at 2.5, and I was getting ready to order stronger, and I started them in September. And Chris is being too shy. We found him through finding a case study that was published by a Mayo, Rochester, and Duke physicians. That was he saved his best friend's kidneys, who was on dialysis on the kidney transplant list. So, I mean, that's when, we were looking for anything for our son, and it actually was helping Carson tremendously. So, I mean, the case study, I attached it to everybody with the original invitation or the original thing to get you to come on and talking about the EC meter. But the case study, big pharma really doesn't want people to know about it because I'm proof positive there's changes, and Carson's creatinine was coming down. So anyway, I don't know if everybody has the case study, but if you ever get a chance to peruse it, it's mind blowing to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of similar work that's been done that's all throughout the PubMed with, the one who's really holds the hat for being one of the top researchers of glycocalyx at this point is Dr. Hans Wenck with all the things that he's published. That said, Christopher, I love the fact that you have really narrowed in on the zeta potential and have taken the look at this from the engineering perspective. I think you're right on target. And that's the part that's often missing within the medical research industry. So I would love to see this come hand in glove, marry the two together so that we can really see the impact. I'll give you another example that goes right hand in hand with what you're talking about. I have an individual who has had severe floaters in their eyes for 40 years as a result of a car accident. They started double dosing the Revasca product, which improves the glycocalyx with all the fucoidins in it. And in 6 weeks, those floaters completely went away. And just like what Terry talked about, she's no longer using her glasses. So, I mean, that really caught my attention because the floaters completely went away, which means we are developing new microvascular and getting that support in there. And obviously it's going in and doing the cleanup. It is completely regenerating.
Yes, so you can regenerate the vascular system, as you're well aware of, and that's kind of the whole point. The microvascular is so important because any kind of clog, any kind of thickening of the blood, and it causes ischemia in the organs, right? All the cells. So if you can keep those open and free flowing, which is the goal of both companies, that's the win. That's what you're looking for.
Did you see the question Sam Asamuga is asking
Oh,
to confirm the name of the meter?
there's so many different brands. There's no particular name of the meter. It's just called a EC meter or electroconductive meter. But they're basically just look for a 4-in-1, just type in 4-in-1 pool meter. And so that, it can measure pH, but it's not that accurate, the pH. You have to, it gets out of whack all the time. You have to adjust it constantly. But I will tell you, this is my meter. If you do get one of these, this little node is pretty sensitive. You have to clean it every time in distilled water, dry it off, with a non-lint towel, dry it off, and then put the cap back on so it stays out of the light. It's light sensitive. So it's just like any tool, you got to take care of it properly. So a lot of people that get it, pull it out, stick it in a liquid, then just put it on the counter, and it's just going to burn out the bulb. So you just got to make sure you handle it properly.
And again, the number range that you are hoping to see when you're measuring that you see is what?
Between 12 and 15.
Christopher, as far as as far as dosing of your products, is there any kind of a way of gauging or making it more for each particular client, patient?
Yeah, so we kind of have what we call a restorative dose and then a support dose. So if you're pretty healthy, nothing going on, you want to take it as preventative. And if you're taking it, if you have any kind of issues going on, like say type 2 diabetes or something, CKD, you want to basically double the dose, but it's on the jar. So it's basically 1 pill for every 25 pounds, roughly. And each pill has got 14 different ingredients. So that's why you got to take multiple pills. It's not just one ingredient. You got 14 different ingredients working together. Yeah. So for myself, I'm 200 pounds. So I take, if I was feeling under the weather, I would take 8. But normally I just take about 5 or 6 a day. But right now we got flu season, allergy season hitting. So I'm taking 12 right now, 12 a day.
Well, I would certainly encourage everybody to get multiple EC meters and distribute them to your patients and then keep very good notes and share them with all of us.
That'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and again, I can very easily set up, case study parameters and make it real easy for you guys to submit the data into
bet.
OT Pro, and we can start publishing that.
Let's get on it.
So Chris, I would say next step is I need to have a one-on-one conversation with you to set up what the parameters of that would look like so that I can go ahead and then put it into a real simple way that the practitioners who are in OG Pro can A, get educated, B, educate their patients, and C, collect the data in a way that is pretty seamless and then starts flowing into the back into the database so that we can actually get those measurements and then absolutely dust off my writing pen and we can actually write some of those up. And then Robert Rowan can help get the word out across his reading population as well.
Great. Yeah. Let's touch base anytime. I'm pretty much available all the time.
Robert Rowan just came in with a message. I appreciate the mention of the floaters. After you mentioned, I just checked my own, which I've had since a toddler. I've been taking the Revasca for a month. I actually think that my rather dense floaters are better. So I didn't notice that until just now. Thank you. Good job, Robert.
Christopher, you mentioned certain things that throw off the electrical charge. I think you call it electrical conductivity. Anything about medications that are causing problems with this?
I haven't looked into any of the medications. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of any medication, period. I get vaccines that you need for any kind of infections, or antivirals, or antimicrobials, but all the medications I'm familiar with all inhibit a body function, so I don't even look into them. It's zeta-effects.com.
Well, Chris, this has been very valuable. And I'm going to stop the recording when we're done. I will edit it and I will make it available to everybody probably this evening.
For practitioners who are wanting to start an account for Revasca, which will give them the wholesale as well as the ability to set it up for their patient population and have all the actual research studies available and stuff like that if they want to go that route instead. I just put the link in the chat for that as well. Christopher, if you have an affiliate program or a wholesale program or whatever, you should probably throw that in there as well. And that way practitioners can get in there and take a look at the different options. They can look at the cost difference. One of the things that I would encourage, if you've not done it yet, Christopher, is you need to get a study done that shows the effectiveness of your product. So that you can back that up with the science. That's one of the things that I will give big time credit to Glycocalyx Research Institute for. They really have done their homework on the product side. It's in like 140 different research hospitals have done the research.
Yeah, we've done some, we're a smaller company. We have done a lot of research. So we've done a really good one on pigs, a porcine one, which shows it as preventative because, I'm a big proponent of prevention is the cure. The cure for cancer is prevention. The cure for any disease is prevention. But we did it, so we're working at the nephrology lab and we're working on something totally different. We're inducing kidney disease in pigs, and then they're mainly trying to understand how the kidneys were working and what was the actual mechanism. But when I started talking to PhD, it's like, I got this supplement, so why don't you pull one set of pigs aside and give it to them for 2 weeks, which we ahead of time, and see how it works as preventative. And so we have a really good study on how it worked. So for example, on this one we have up on screen, you can see, so this group 1 was on our Zeta, we called Zeta Shield at the time, for 2 weeks prior to, and then we injected with malic acid, which is a standard way to induce acute kidney injury. Question? Okay. And so the UPC stayed relatively low on the pigs that had the preventative. On the regular diet, without our supplement, the UPC went through the roof. Same thing, the creatinine levels stayed normal on the pigs, shot through the roof on group 2, then same thing with the BUN. But to me, the most telling thing, we have some videos we got to get out, was just visually seeing the pigs. When the pigs were injected, within 20 minutes, they had flu-like symptoms, were vomiting, and would sleep like for hours on end. But the pigs that are on the preventative pill, basically just took the supplements with their meals. You couldn't even tell they were sick. They just acted like pigs again. They went right back to eating, playing, goofing around. It really worked so we have some pretty good studies that show it works as a preventative, which is a tough sell. Selling something as a preventative, people always want to, especially in Texas, they're like, oh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They wait till afterwards, which is a tough thing to get through to people, as I'm sure you're all aware of, is how crucial prevention is. But we have some pretty telling studies that show it works pretty well for prevention.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
sorry about that. Yeah, so for 2 weeks ahead of time, we fed these pigs our supplement along with their food. It's the same supplements we sell right now. And so on day 14, after I'm taking it, we injected them malic acid, which is a standard way to induce an acute kidney injury. And so we injected them, like I said, the UPC levels stayed relatively low on the ones that were on our Zeta Shield. It's our product right now. And the ones that got the regular diet, the UPC just shot up, just went through, they just had massive proteinuria. Same with the creatinine levels in their blood. It raised slightly, the normal amount would be below this line. It went just above normal on some pigs and shot through the creatinine levels on the pigs that didn't have it. And the same with the BUN, is all similar. But in this one pig right here, every time we do the study, you always get a super pig where nothing affected it. So this guy was a healthy freak of nature. He's the same pig that always has low numbers no matter what. But he's just a beast. But yeah, so to answer your question, we've done studies. They're not as many as the other company has done, but we haven't been around as long. And it being more of a supplement, no matter what we do, we can't make any claims for the FDA. If we put one thing on there, no matter how much proof we have, it's in their bylaws that supplements can't cure or treat anything. So we can't even make a claim. So we're kind of, how much money do we waste doing studies when we, time and time again, we can't really make the claim on it. But if you go back to the website, there are some good case studies with a lot of vets involved that show cats with heart disease and acute kidney injury, and they pop right back.
Well, Chris, you may not be able to make the claims, but we can make the observations.
Yes, yes, they can make the observations. And so right now, and even with we worked with 4 vets, got involved when a cat had a heart disease. He had heart disease and acute kidney injury on top of it, and they're about to put it down. I said, well, the cat's pretty young and healthy. He's non-azotemic. Let me just give the supplements a try. Took him off all the meds. Within 2 weeks, he was back to normal. And it's interesting because, I was talking to the owner. They're like, "Oh my God, the vets are going to be doing backflips." The vets just shrugged their shoulders and didn't care. They're like, "Oh, you know, cats are funny. It happens." And they didn't care why I got better. Didn't know why I got better. It's just is what it is. So it's a tough battle. I guess my point, if we do these studies, they seem to go nowhere with the medical industry. Same thing with doctors. We'll do it with doctors, and they're kind of, well, it's N of 1. Well, it's N of 10. And then it comes out the docs we've been working with are financed by big pharma, and they don't want to kill that paycheck, and we can't match the paycheck. So right now we're kind of just going direct to consumer, and we'll build it rather than pour money into endless studies. We're gonna just pour it into getting word out there, word of mouth, and building it organically. But we do have plenty of studies that we're going to start publishing on the website. There's dozens of studies on the pet website, but the human one will start adding them to that site too.
Chris, have you made any efforts to contact Robert Kennedy Jr.?
I don't have any connections to him. I've had friends. I've actually published an article for him. Not for him directly, but promoting his stuff and how it's all true. But I haven't been able to contact him. No, I would love to talk to him. Because interestingly enough, what he's going through right now happened over 120 years ago. Identical. So here's the book called The History of a Crime, published by Harvey Wiley. And in my opinion, Harvey Wiley should be the fifth head on Mount Rushmore. This guy was an amazing American. It's why we're alive today. So prior to 1906, the FDA started 1906. He wrote the laws and all the rules and pushed hard for 20 years prior, because prior to 1906, the big food industries were putting formaldehyde, aluminum in your food, and the average person wasn't living very long. And in fact, I don't know if you saw that documentary Super Size Me. He did one back in 1902 called The Poison Squad. There's documentaries on it, but it was did it in 1902. Got the New York Post involved and said, follow these kids, healthy 18-year-old kids. Started feeding them, Kellogg's and General Mills food, and they started getting sick within a month. Again, they had formaldehyde, aluminum, and they didn't have to post any of the food they had to put in there. So finally, Roosevelt appointed him as the first head of the FDA, but it went nowhere. He got quickly, Big Food said, Roosevelt, we pay your salary, rein in your bulldog here. So nothing got passed. So basically, this is just excerpts from the Senate hearing when he was trying to pass laws. And it was just all these other professionals and doctors saying aluminum is needed. You have to have aluminum in the food or we'll all die. Same thing that's going on with, food dyes and preservatives. He's back from 1890 until his death in 1929. He is saying, you got to get this out of the food. Same thing Kennedy's doing today. Same Senate hearings. It's amazing to read this book, how you're going, this happened with Kennedy? No, and instead of writing about it, he puts in just the actual excerpts, the dictation notes, to see word for word who said what, because it's just too fantastical to put into regular words. So he just put the transcripts in on the Senate hearings, and it's just insane what he went through, what Kennedy's going through right now. It's crazy.
There's a question that was brought up in the chat that I would like to bring forward to everyone who's on this call, because it is important and it was an excellent question. Are there any contraindications of the products, any kind of patients who shouldn't take the product? I'm going to address this from the perspective of what I have seen with Revasca. People who have blood pressure issues, people who have blood sugar issues, people who are on those medications, it's not don't do it. It's start low, slow, and monitor, because you will get a rapid normalization, which then can lead to headaches. It can lead to lightheadedness. You can see a little bit of diarrhea, because essentially what you're doing is you're rapidly reestablishing the cell wall component. You're reestablishing that zeta potential very, very quickly. And with that, sometimes you can get a little bit of an adverse side effect that can basically make the patient feel a little uncomfortable. And the issue with that is they can interpret that as a negative response and then not want to continue. So the way to do it is just, when you're in an emergency situation, it's a whole nother story, as Chris will certainly agree with. But if you're in a more chronic situation, just start low and slow and work your way up and measure that blood sugar, measure that blood pressure, and just keep an eye on it.
Exactly. Yeah. So like when I tell everybody when they first started, if they have any kind of issues going on, the dosage, like say for me, would be 8 pills a day. I'd say just try one, the first day, and then the second day, double it. Then in 4 days, you'll be up to 8. But yeah, slow, exactly what you just mentioned is identical. With any supplement, you always try slow and say, okay, see how this is going to affect anything. But there is no, it doesn't affect any of the drugs in any way adversely.
Well, it can, just from the fact that they don't need them.
Oh, yeah. So
you have to be ready to titrate down the drug, or you're going to run into some hypostatic issues and things like that. But that's not a bad thing. Both Chris and I think that's amazing, and that's just getting the body back to where it should be.
Yes, we've got a lot of people who've taken it for a while now, and they started on 3 different drugs, and now they're on 0. No statins, no blood pressure medications. They're on 0 drugs now, as they should be. But I talked to a lot of people my age, and I'm 61. They're like, I'm only on 3 drugs. I'm like, what? We need only? Well, everybody else is on 5 or 6. I'm like, whoa. You should be on 0, in my opinion.
Chris, could you take a second to tell us how you started to look at this in the first place?
Well, how I got into this in the first place?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I've always been into health and fitness. And then friends and family members started getting chronic kidney disease. And a friend of mine, Terry mentioned, he got minimal change disease at age 54. And that was real strange because he's a pretty healthy guy. And then it was probably the most drastic issue I've ever seen to this day. Within a month, his whole upper body was just scrawny. His lower body looked like giant sausages. He had 70 pounds of edema within 1 month. So he just, and so that really opened my eyes, like, oh my gosh. So my sister got chronic kidney disease and cancer. And so I just kind of dove in head first. Okay, let's see what we can do here, because no one's given us any kind of hope. So she went to MD Anderson here in Houston. They're supposed to be the tops. And I was kind of working with her on her diet. And they were just telling her, no, don't change your diet. Your diet's fine. Just take these meds, these pills. And so that's what she wanted to hear, because she had a terrible diet. And my doctor said, that's MD Anderson, stick to your diet. And I asked her, okay, how long did you guys talk about your diet? Oh, I didn't tell him what I was eating. So how does he know what your diet is? And so that was kind of motivating me more. Okay. But even though family, it was a tough battle to try and get her to change her diet, because her doctor said, stick to your diet. And so back to the original question. So there was an opportunity, because I did some consulting for a medical device, to get into a cure for kidney disease. There's an upstart here, a startup here in Austin, and they wanted someone from engineering background. They want all different disciplines to try and look at it. And so I took an on-paid position as a consultant. And then a year and a half, I was running the place on doing kidney research. So when I dive head in first into something, I dive head first. I go deep. And so that's in a nutshell, that's how I got involved with it. But it was those reading thousands of studies. The Knize one was a key one. Riddick's book was a key one. And then Moeller's electrokinetic theory put it all together. Okay, that's like, once you understand how kidney works, then you just ties it all in with the blood, and you realize almost most issues are vascular related. As Knize pointed out, it's just everything's ischemia related from the blood getting thicker and sludging.
Just to give people a little bit of perspective regarding the blood getting sludgy and all of that type of stuff, this is where some of the products that you saw really heavily recommended and that we wrote about in the pandemic prevention paper that we did back in July of 2020. This is also where nattokinase comes in and has a play, and lumbrokinase and serrapeptase. Those all come in and help remove some of that extracellular debris. So they work together with the things that you are hearing Christopher talk about here today. So that's, just kind of helps draw some of that connection there. The other thing that really also plays into this, that the body can be done very naturally in the body, is this is where we get into intermittent fasting and that process of autophagy. That is also a significant component to this. So while you hear us talking about, yeah, there's these great supplements and let's stop doing some of these other things, just know that there are lifestyle factors that everyone can be doing, particularly when we're dealing with those patients who are just financially really, really, really constrained. There's a lot that we can still encourage them to do. The other part that I think has a huge play in this, Chris, and isn't being talked about nearly enough, is going to light exposure. All the photobiomodulation things that we're seeing. In fact, I'm working with right now, I've got a woman who is 20 weeks pregnant, who has a tumor in her hippocampus, which has to be assumed to be a glioblastoma until proven otherwise. Typical length of life after diagnosis of a glioblastoma is 16 months. This woman is 27 years old. So we are getting started right now with the Revasca. We're getting started with ozonated glycerin orally and nebulizing. And then we are also getting started with photobiomodulation. Why are we using these therapies? They're all do no harm to the baby that she is currently carrying. Now, here's the really wild part. If you look at her environmental history, she came out of an old moldy house that had just gotten remodeled. It was in Indiana, survived on a 1-acre property, surrounded on 3 sides by commercial cornfield, complete with planes flying overhead. So, doing all of their crop dusting. So we're doing all the environmental toxin testing right now, super high levels of glyphosate, blah, 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 blah. We've moved her out of that environment. She's moved here to Colorado. My church is wrapping around her at the moment. And literally, we've given her a home and everything else so that we can rehabilitate her. We're doing this all at no cost. And the reason is because of the fact that we want to show that you can reverse these things in the most unusual circumstances without having to do the crash and burn methodology. And right now, mainstream medicine won't touch her with a 10-foot pole because she's pregnant.
Wow. Yep, I believe that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a very impressive application. I hope you'll keep sharing these things because we all need to work together to gather all of this data and make it happen.
Well, I'm looking at picking up an EC meter and doing her glyco checks.
Yeah.
And then what I can do, Christopher, is I can start showing the, for one thing, I need to make sure that she stays on the straight and narrow with doing everything we need to do to help grow this baby. So I'm really kind of looking forward to, great, this is a tool I can use for her.
Yeah, and like I say, so when a lot of people, the girl who works for me, she does our shipping. She's had a couple miscarriages. Um, she just wasn't that healthy, only 25. And so we put her on the product and made sure, she saw the cats were doing. And, she had real thinning hair. She's always stressed all the time, but didn't change her diet, just put her on the products. And she now has a 5-month-old healthy baby girl. And so yeah, once I showed her the presentation, just showed how healthy blood vessels and what our whole science is, and just what sick blood vessels, how it deprives the body from its nutrients and oxygen. And it's exactly what you're talking about. Preeclampsia is a big deal. It's just but it's all vascular related. Everyone thinks it's idiopathic, some autoimmune disease, but to me, it's not. If you fix the upstream, which you and I 100% agree on, you're going to see all the benefits by having a healthy vascular system.
If you go back and you look at the work of Don Huber, who's a very dear friend of mine, and Stephanie Seneff, who Don started working with pretty extensively. This has started back before COVID timeframe, There was extensive issues with miscarriages and things like that. A lot of it is related to the glyphosate 2,4-D and DDT. Don and I both were in Idaho in agrarian areas, and we were seeing it heavily throughout the population there. Don was cracking the code with some of the work that he was doing with the fulvics and the humics, as well as with the binders to help reestablish, and it connects directly into what we're talking about here.
Yes, because all those heavy metals and those petroleum-based uh, glycosates, the spraying they put on those crops, like I say, they're heavy metals that just you can take out the components and watch how they drop the zeta potential. You know, put one little drop in a glass of milk and watch it coagulate. So 100%. And again, that's to me, that's just zeta potential. And you can look at those drugs or chemicals and see how they affect zeta potential. It drops it like a rock.
I want to thank you, Chris, and everybody for participating. And as I say, I will share this immediately tonight.